strikes midnight. The veil between worlds grows thin, and the stories begin to stir. Welcome to Midnight Whispers with Naomi, where ancient legends and spooky tales find their voice in the darkness. So close your eyes, slow down your breath, and take a midnight walk with us. This is the story of a 23-year-old woman that's color fame. She was half Cherokee, who originally came from Georgia. At the time this story took place, she and her fiance were living at a large farm in Maryland. They didn't use the farm, but they were renting a small house on the property and were free to go and come around the grounds as they pleased. At the time this story took place, she was only 19 years old, and the only residents in their house were herself, her fiance, a cat, and her dog. The cat was a lunatic barn cat she had rescued because she couldn't say no to animals in need. And her dog was a loyal pit bull, a sweet, cuddly, scaredy cat. The dog weighed about 75 pounds and was afraid of her own shadow. Their farm was situated in about 20 acres of land, and their driveway was about half a mile long. Usually when she got home from work, she would go for a walk with her loyal dog, and often invited her fiance to join her, not because she was afraid to go out alone, but because he spent too much time playing games and not enough being active. Beyond their driveway, a 12-mile road would go through the woods and farms before finally reconnecting with civilization. And so it was safe to say they were far, far from other people, except for their landlord, of course. The first mile was through farmland, followed by a brief patch of forest, about half a mile of wheat fields, and then solid forest for 2 miles more. Now that the layout is clear, onto the really creepy bit. It started off like any other weekday evening, and she and her fiance returned home from work to their happy cottage and happy pets. Harley, their dog, was frantic to go for a walk, so she quieted her, changed her into walking clothes, and asked if her fiance would join her. He had gotten home shortly after her, and he had seen one of the coyotes that were often around, close to the field by their house. But as many know, coyotes are mostly scavengers, especially on the East Coast, so she wasn't too worried and was very capable of defending herself. She called him a wuss, and then told Harley they could go for a walk, and they would be fine without him. Laughing to herself, she left the cottage with Harley and started walking towards the driveway. The sun was going down, and the October air had started to get a little chilly. Rustling for the cornfields next to their long driveway. The corn was about 6 feet tall at this point in the year and impossible to see through. So she assumed her fiance was just trying to scare her, because there was no way have seen a coyote in that field. Harley was enjoying her time in the field, tearing in and out of the corn stalks. On her walk up the driveway, she knew that a big coward of a dog, as Harley was, she would alert her to any danger very quickly by running away. By the time they reached the end of the driveway, the sun had already set, and the moon, which had already come out, was shining high above the fields. It wasn't quite full, but it provided enough light that she didn't need to use her flashlight or Harley's collar light. They turned left down the road and proceeded across the first section of the field. The first field was soybeans, and if you don't know, they are relatively short plants. Nothing but rabbits could hide in it. Off in the distance she spotted a few deer, but nothing alarming. So they relaxed and enjoyed their walk through the night air. She threw a stick, and Harley brought it back over and over again. The typical dog owner stuff. They reached the first small section of trees, and Harley stopped and bumped into her leg, letting her know that there was something ahead. It wasn't a coyote or a deer, but there was a rabbit that had been hit by a passing car, and it was still struggling. As much as she hated to say it, there was no way it was going to live, and honestly, it was probably what drew the coyote back in. She knelt down by it and, using her knife, quickly put an end to its misery as her family taught her to. They continued walking past it into the next field. It was a wheat field. The wheat was about ready to harvest, so it was quite tall and hard to see through. The field was quiet, and Harley didn't do anything, so she figured the coyotes had moved on, if there had been any at all. Now comes the part everyone has been waiting for. She didn't know what it was, but this is the unexplainable thing that happened to her next. They rounded the corners of the field around the area with the wheat. They rounded the corner of the field and into an area with wheat on their left and trees on their right. And the air seemed to go still. Harley got closer to her, and they heard a rustling in the wheat fields. She saw 3 tails circling backward to the forest. Coyotes. Eastern coyotes are small, but in a pack, they get pretty ballsy. Harley raised her hackles, and Faye yelled, "Get out of here, get out of here, go on. Get out of here, get out of here," as loud as she could, and the coyotes, startled, scattered off into the darkness. She decided to turn around and get out of there before they decided to regroup. She was brave, but she was no fool. She was not about to walk into the darkened forest with a couple of coyote packs lurking in the and a cowardly pit bull offering little protection. She turned her head back, and again she heard a rustling in the wheat fields. They turned to head back, and again she heard a rustling in the wheat fields. A confused coyote. She thought that's what it must be. She whistled for Harley to come with her. That high-pitched, two-finger whistle. This snapped Harley out of it for a second when all of a sudden her whistle was returned from inside the wheat. All of a sudden, all the family legends that were told to her came back, flooding her memories. And she expected to see a tall, thin creature emerge. But nothing did. She didn't smell rotting meat or feel the sense of dread. Instead, she was transfixed with fear and curiosity. She whistled again, and the whistle was returned once more. Again, very human sounding, but at the same time, not quite. Against her better judgment, she said, "Hello." Her own voice replied, "Hello, hello." Her hand gripped the knife. "Show yourself." Silence. No box, no coyote, no Harley noises, just her own breath. Slowly the rustling started again, and she turned her flashlight on. She shined it on the wheat field. What she saw confuses her to this day. Animal eyes, green, yellow, reflection of light was cast back at her. But what it was connected to didn't make any sense. There was a girl, no more than 14 years old, crouched in the wheat. And she wore what must have been some kind of deer skin or fur, as she was otherwise completely naked. She was very thin and looked as though her skin had never seen the sunlight before. Her hair was long and tangled with wheat leaves. Under any other circumstances, she would have said the girl was beautiful. But at that moment, she was terrifying. They stared at each other for what must have been a solid minute or so, but it did feel like much longer, until she heard the unmistakable howl of a coyote coming from the forest. Both of their heads snapped towards the sound, and immediately she heard the girl take off towards the forest through the wheat fields. At the same moment, Harley took off towards their home, and she went after her. They didn't stop running until they reached the driveway, where they stopped, not wanting her fiancé to know she was running away from She could still hear the howling in the distance, and they started walking at a brisk pace. They made it back to the cottage with no further incidents, and she didn't tell her fiancé about it, not wanting him to go out with a gun. The girl hadn't heard her, so she didn't think it was right to hunt her down. She was awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of coyotes outside of the house. This wasn't unusual, but she wondered if the girl was with them. Weeks passed, the memory told, nearly forgotten until one night when she came home from work about a month later. She had stopped obsessing about the night and almost felt as if though she had maybe imagined it. When she had to slam on her brakes for something in the middle of the road, it was dark, and when her headlights hit it, yellow-green eyes reflected. It was a large coyote. It just stared at her car for a moment and then ran off into the woods. She knew this sounded crazy, but she was wondering if that was the girl. Some stories never leave the fields. In the hush, glances in the dark, a voice that calls your own call back. Thank you for walking the night with me. Sleep